So they had this vote, and he said 25% of the band council members, registered members within the Mohawks, the Bay of Quinte band, they gave it to them that they would be able to accept the $30 million and also make a decision about how to handle the 300 acres. And the negotiations was to actually buy the 300 acres with the part of the $30 million that was given for loss of use and access. And so they acknowledged that there was a theft and the loss of use and access, and then the federal government refused to return the land or to remove its people from it, even though the Simcoe deed says that people are trespassing. If the Crown's subjects are trespassing, then it'll be on their responsibility, the Crown's responsibility, to remove them. Like it spells it right out in the treaty. So the federal government's bound to do that, and then, or if they fail, then I guess it would fall on the people living on to remove them. And so instead, what they did was they made this vote, and amongst a small group of our own people, or people that are registered as band members here, and they decided that they would first of all take the money that everybody that was there was entitled to sum up, because we all equally share those lands together, so they didn't. They just took it and decided that they're going to use that. We're going to put that in a trust fund and give that to Bank of Montreal investment portfolios to allocate to use that money to invest it wherever they want to, I guess, and generate revenue back without the consent of the people, and then buy the land from a landowner. And who knows if they have a relationship or not, or I don't know. Maybe they get a kickback out of it if they pay extra or whatever. And then those lands are going to be held in a trust by Bank of Montreal trustees for a number of years, while the landowner takes some of the money that he got for selling it to decommission a provincial quarry that was put on the land, where they literally stole the resources and then shipped that out and sold it all over, and was the main tax base for the town of Toronto. So he gets paid to decommission the quarry, and then once that's completed, then the trustees will on behalf of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte Band Council, right? Because that's not the Mohawk people of the Bay of Quinte. That's the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte Band Council, which is like a corporation. It's an extension of the federal government, because it only exists because of the Indian Act, and the Indian Act only exists because of federal statute within the Canadian government. And it comes from the British North America Act, where the federal government had a series of responsibilities, and the provinces had a series of responsibilities, and the federal government wrote in itself that it would be responsible for Indians and lands reserved for Indians. And so they created the Indian Act so that they would have a set of rules as to how they would manage Indians and lands reserved for Indians, which is different than Indian reserves. They're two different things. Land reserved for Indians are spelled out within the Royal Proclamation 1763, which is the founding document of Canada. It's mentioned in Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution as a founding document. And in there, land reserved for Indians are lands that don't have treaties on them. And so that's all Indian country. That's where, and it says that the British subjects aren't allowed to settle it, and they can't do anything there. And they can't do business with Indians that are living on it unless they get a license from the British Crown, so a federal license to be able to do business with the Indians. Not the other way around. Anyways, this is disgusting what I seen. First of all, it wasn't very well, in my opinion anyways, it wasn't very well publicized that this meeting was happening, and that they were going to sign this stuff. And part of the reason why I think that is that, and in my circles of people, I didn't hear anybody talking about it. In fact, there was a few people who messaged me and contacted me and asked me if what was going on, what was the meeting, kind of the day before the meeting. And what they were asking about was that if we knew what the details were, because Marc Miller, the Minister of Indigenous Affairs, had been in Six Nations, I think the week prior, and had met with some of the Confederacy, Six Nations Confederacy leadership or individuals, as well as the Six Nations Elected Band Council and the Grand River. So people were questioning what's Marc Miller doing coming down here next. Is he on some sort of tour? Or is there some sort of a plan in place? People were curious because it wasn't clear to people. So people at Six Nations or people here at Kanenhariyo, and our two communities are linked. We're connected. So I didn't think it was very well publicized because it seemed like nobody was really talking about it. And then in the photos that I seen of the event that happened yesterday, it didn't look like there was very many people there. There was, I wasn't in attendance. I wasn't able to go. I had to attend to some family affairs, and I actually wasn't aware of the severity of the meeting. So I assumed that if it was going to be something like that, everybody would know about it. It would be very out in the public, but it seemed to be not the case. Anyways, I'm sure someone will say to me, "Oh no, it was put on a tweet and it was put on Facebook," but the algorithm only resonates so far. So it's not really the way to try to reach all your people when you got a whole membership of people or a whole group of people to be able to know what's going on when you're doing something of such serious nature. Anyways, so my thoughts about it are pretty mixed. I guess they're not mixed. They're just really upsetting. I seen literally just sitting at the table. There's Marc Miller and the elected band council chief, who's been elected band council chief for something like 30 years. He's like the longest running elected band council Indian affairs leader in Canadian history, I believe. Something like that. Like it's really super long time, 30 some years. And so he's sitting there wearing a Gostoa, wearing an electrical headdress, wearing a suit. And the Ministry of Indian Affairs, Indigenous Affairs, Marc Miller, who consequently was also had learned to speak a bit of Mohawk, and which some people think is pretty cool, pretty exciting. And this is also the individual who was a soldier that was deployed in 1990 against the Mohawk people who are defending their lands against expansion of a golf course into a cemetery and cutting down ancient trees and so on. And so this guy was a soldier that was actually participated in the removal of Mohawk people from their lands and arrests and all that sort of stuff. And and Mohawk children, there was my friend. She was just a kid, got bayoneted by the soldiers, and they did a lot of wrong things. So this guy was with that group of people doing those things, spearing the food and wrecking the flour and butter and oil and everything so that people couldn't eat, and not allowing people to have access to medicine. And basically he's a participant in genocide in 1990 that was televised on TV, and no one got any charges from it except for some of the Indians. But that's who this fella is. So he's sitting in the middle, and then all the photos I seen, each of the different, there was 4 band counselors, and they all took a turn and sat beside the Minister of Indigenous Affairs, Marc Miller, and they all were signing a paper. Looked like everybody was taking a turn to mark the pages. So all 4 of them, it looks like they signed it, and the chief, and then Marc Miller himself. So they signed the deal, and it was really upsetting to me. Like, for example, one of the things that they did was they put all the symbols, or a bunch of symbols were gifts from the royal family over the last 300 years. And we've got these gifts were affirmations of our legal international friendship agreement called the Silver Covenant Chain, and our allied relationship, and that's why we're separate. We're not underneath British law. We're separate people. We're not underneath Canadian law, and so they had those things out. They had the silver. There's a chalice, and it's got a dent in it, and that dent was made when we left the valley. It was given to us as a gift in 1710, I think, and I might be mistaken on the date, but they buried it when we left the valley, Mohawk Valley, because we're the Mohawks of the Mohawk Valley, and we're the Mohawks they call the Mohawks of the Six Nations. There's the Mohawks of the Seven Nations, and there's the Mohawks of the Six Nations, and we're politically a bit different, and we're the ones that have the political alliance and relationship with the British Crown. We are the ones that have the two-row wampum and the Silver Covenant Chain. That's our people, and we're basically divided between two communities. We're here on the shores of the Bay of Quinte and on the shores of the Grand River. And those two Mohawk communities are the Mohawk people of those two comprise all the titles of the 9 titles of the Confederacy for the Mohawks of the Six Nations, and they comprise of all the families, and so we're all really deeply connected in our history and our bloodline and so on. And so these are our lands that we negotiated for in response to our loss of our homeland in the Mohawk Valley, due to our losses and casualties and losses to American genocide during the American Revolution. So, anyways, that seems like a lot to talk about, but what was disgusting about it was that they literally had one of the chalices that was after we left and we came here and we resettled as refugees and had to restart over in this is hunting grounds for us and move here. They sent some of the young warriors down, and I believe it was like 10 years after we had left the valley, because we were 7 years in Lachine and then a couple of years here. They sent down and they had to sneak in there and they dug them up, the pieces of silver, because they had buried all the valuables, so they didn't take them with them because they were hunting us as we were running for our lives out of the valley to Lachine. And the story is that they hit one of the pieces of silver with a shovel and left a dent. And so they never took that dent out of that piece, and so that piece was there, and that was a gift from the royal family as a solution and as a part of a gift or a promise about our allied relationship that we'd say separate, and it's why we have it's part of the reason. I mean, it's a longer story, historical story about why we have 2 royal chapels in Mohawk territory, one at Brantford and one here at the Kanenhariyo, and these two royal chapels really are they're embassies for the sovereign of England. This is their place to go to worship, and also it's their place where their people are to go to get salvation if they're acting up or they're having trouble. Because the way the elders told me was that the reason we ended up with those churches was because they went there in 1710, our ancestors, some of the leaders, and they met with them and they asked them about what you do with their citizens that started participating in witchcraft, because it was a new thing for our people, and it was their people that were living in our land who emigrated and become part of the Mohawk people that were using medicine against each other, their witchcraft against each other. And so those chiefs, those leaders went there to England and asked them. It was one of the things that they were wanting to have a solution about, was what to do with their citizens that are participating, doing this sort of things, because it wasn't something we had experienced. And the response was that they offer them the church, they offer them a religion to give them guidance so that they become better people. And so he gave them the silver pieces. Some of them are at Six Nations and some of them are at Kanenhariyo, and one piece got sold on the way home. And there was also some 10 Commandments that are all written in Mohawk, and there was books that were printed and so on. And so this was for them. That was for those people that were participating in witchcraft, as a way for them to stop doing that. the white people, and also as a place to garrison for a military British military officers. It was a place to have a store of weapons, cache of weapons. I guess you call it an armory, and a place where they would have soldiers to defend it and to protect it. And so that was how it was set up in the Mohawk Valley. And then when we moved here, it was perpetuated. And so there's only 2 royal chapels outside of England, are those 2. What it was really bothersome was that where they were signing the documents, these individuals are all elected officials of the Canadian government, like the chief and the 4 councillors and the Marc Miller, the Oka soldier, all Canadian government officials. They're not elected in any way within our clan structure or fit within the proceeds of what's described within the Simcoe deed in any regard, right? Maybe you could claim them as being, they might be heirs. But even still, they don't have the authority or the right, in accordance to any of our customs or tradition, to be doing any of the things that they were up to. And here they were, and they literally have, when the elected band council system was put in place, they did it by gunpoint here, and they took over the council hall, the meeting hall for the people. And in that building, there was a big safe, and in that safe is where they kept all of the relics and the most important documents, and that's where they kept the Queen Anne silver and all the wampum belts and papers, and also all kind of bonds and money. And that safe got moved from there to at one point with one of the elected chiefs, I think his name was John Hill. It got moved to his house, and for many years the Queen Anne silver was, that's what they call it, was kept in that safe in that house on Ridge Road. But over time, the elected band council system has usurped all of those documents and all of those political gifts. That's the legitimacy of the physical artifacts that of proof of the existence of our treaty relationships, and they seize them and they hold them in their possession, and they don't allow the people, particularly the Longhouse people who are in the Mohawk Nation chiefs, are the ones who should have those things, because that's the ones, it's their ancestors, their people that negotiate that. But they hold them in perpetuity, and they don't allow that. And so here they had them out. They had silver and a couple chalices, and they also had a Bible that was signed as a reaffirmation of our treaty relationship. I think it was like 1985. It was right at the same time that the Queen come and she signed the Canadian Constitution. She came here and she reaffirmed our separate allied nation relationship that's separate from being Canada, and brought a gift of a hymn book or a Bible of her father's, and she signed it, and it was left here in the church over here. That's her church, the people's church. And they had that Bible out there as well. They had all the relics, all the symbols of our special allied relationship. Except the individuals who signed it didn't have no business to do that. And then there's the chief wearing a Gustowa, and then beside him, Marc Miller, and then each of those counselors, and the one counselor, Stacia Loft. I know her like our whole lives, and it bothers me what I seen, because I remember her. We went to school together. She's a little bit younger than me, not much, a couple of years maybe, and she left here when she was young. Left and was gone away. I think North Bay for a real long time, and maybe 20 years or something like that. Maybe not so long. I'm not sure, but I know it wasn't a long time. Eventually, she came back, and she pursued a law degree, and she's married to a fellow. It's not Ungahume. It's from another place in the world. I don't remember where. I don't have anything begrudging, negative to say about him or nothing like that. Just she told me one time that she tried to go back to the Longhouse and had an interest to be learn our culture and learn our ways, because she didn't know about them and wanted to participate and want to be part of that. And she felt a bit shunned. She told me that she wasn't treated very welcome, and so we talked about that, her and I. And I said, well, that's not right. That's not how it should be. But I understand it because the Longhouse people don't consider the band council people as like that they're doing the right thing, that they're actually working against us. They're actually like treason because they're assisting and imposing the Indian Act on us. And so the Longhouse people don't like that. And so she was kind of felt dispossessed, or like she wasn't really that welcome because of her participation in the Indian Act system. And then she didn't run. She wasn't counselor for a while, and that's when I got reconnected with her, and she finished a law degree, and then here she's back in band council again, and there she is signing the papers, and she don't even know about our ways. You know, and I find bothersome. And then there's another fella in there, and I knew him too, and he was our lacrosse coach when I was a kid, Chris Merkel, and he ran for council. He always seemed to me that he was always working for Indian Act system, band council. He's the guy that he got a bunch of awards for building all these houses. They were circumventing the people's money that was give to all the Indians so that they could get a house. There was a bit of money that they could get, and you use that to be able to build a house. And then the elected band council system here and elsewhere decided to take that money instead of giving it to the people the way they were supposed to. And I know that was in fact the case because the man that worked on that, his name was David Newhouse, and he worked at Indian Affairs, and he was one of my professors when I was in university. And I know that he was the one that worked on that to get a set amount of money that would be given to Indigenous people and Indians to be able to build a house. Because before that, you couldn't even get a loan. We can't get a bank loan to do that. And so it was set aside money. And then the elected band councils changed that. And what they did instead was they would loan the money instead of giving it. It was not supposed to be paid back. But they'd loan the money and then charge a high interest rate. So people had to pay back a high interest rate to be able to build a house. And then they use the money that they're making off the high interest rate to build more finances. This is the federal government doing this within our own communities. And so this guy was participated in that because they started taking the money, and instead of giving loans, they just kept it, and then they built subdivisions so they could put people on long-term rental units, and they never own the land and never own the property. They just pay rent forever, and then there's perpetual income for the elected band council, for the federal government to keep financing its own agenda on our land. Take the money that was supposed to be earmarked for the individual Indians to be able to build something because you can't even get a housing loan, and then steal the money, put it into subdivisions, and then make the people pay rent forever. And anyways, this fellow was the one that was instrumental in designing these houses, and he won awards for it, and people were pretty impressed with him. I always thought he was a fairly friendly guy, and he was a good lacrosse coach, but I seen him there signing them documents, and he's wearing a Gostoa and had antlers on it. That's a symbol of that's an ancient symbol within the great law of what the clans do when they bestow the leadership onto someone. We call that Royana. It means he's a good man. He's a good one, and that's the official symbol. That's how you know that guy's the chief. He's the Royana. He's the leader. He's the head. He's the one speaking for his clan. And this fellow's there wearing a Gostoa, and I don't think he's been condoled as a chief and put through the ceremonies for that, or even has an Indian name. And I don't know that he's even actually I don't think he's been named in our system or any of those things. I don't believe so. And so I for sure know that that's inappropriate, and it's like usurping our traditional system and making it look like for the photo op that these people are legitimately signing this in accordance with the Simcoe deed or in accordance with our customs and usages, and in fact it's just making a mockery and frauding it. And it's like worse than pretending you're a police officer or something, I'm disgusted. And it's hard because here's the people that I grew up with, people that I know in my whole life, and this is the things they're doing. Like they don't care, like it don't matter, like it's like like they're faking. They're frauding and faking, and it's disgusting. And then another one was a counselor, and I knew that kid since he was a little boy. I remember teaching him Mohawk when he was a little boy. And I told him I had a bad feeling. He was a little kid, and he was kind of bad, whatever, throwing rocks and stuff. And I was a young teenager. I think I was teaching Mohawk. I was like 13 or 14 years old. And he threw a rock in my direction, and I threw him back at him. Hey, what are you doing? But I hit him with the rock. I felt guilty for that for like 20 years or something, and I felt so bad. And I noticed he grew up differently than other kids, and he wasn't interested, didn't seem to be really pro Longhouse ways or want to sing our songs or participate with all the dances and or the language. And I always felt that maybe that rock I threw in his direction that hit him, I thought that maybe that influenced him in a way that made him steer away from our way, because he's one of very few of our young people who did that. Most of them woke up after 1990, and the majority of our people started to shift back towards our tradition and our culture, and they won't become band counselors, and they rejected the Indian Act, and they became entrepreneurs, and most of them didn't have no interest to become police officers and this sort of thing. So they don't have a very big pool to draw from of people to do those things, because the majority of our people were like, no, we don't want that, and they're embracing our way. There was a shift, and that guy, I don't think he don't love our language and stuff, but I seen him go in a little bit different direction, and I always felt like that I did that, and so I apologized to him during the tracks about that. He was sick, real sick that time. We had that meeting, and they thanked me for what we did. They thanked me. They called me and asked me to come over there, and they thanked me for what we did, and the tracks being closed down. And then we talked about a transition. They're talking about how we need to have a transition plan, an exit strategy to get off the tracks. And I told them that they needed to have an exit strategy to get out of the Indian Act money. They had to get away from, they had to make a plan, because it was the same couple families, 3-4 families, who've been accepting the Indian Affairs money and doing all the Indian Affairs jobs for decades and decades and decades. And it's the same bunch. And so we talked about that, and I told them, I said, you need to have a strategy, an exit strategy for your family, so that you have another income and you can give up this oppressing us with the Indian Act. Because it's coming to an end, and we're not going to tolerate it. It's going to have to go. And so now I see what they're doing. They're usurping all of our things and pretending that they're us. They're pretending that they're Kanenhariyo and pretending that they're part of the Udingushuni. And that elected band council chief Don Miracle, he last year when he got voted back in again, they did a little video, and he called himself a Royane, Wolf Clan. That's not Royane at all. And I think that people need to be aware, and they need to be outraged, and because it's a complete lie. It's a complete lie. And so there you got one calling himself a Royane, and he's not that. He don't have anything to do with Kanenhariyo or Ganusesne or any of that. He's fraudster. And then and that's the one they're calling Donnie the Chief. And another one, counselor wearing the horns. Another fraudster. I don't even know if that guy knows what he was wearing, to be honest with you. I don't know him to know really anything about our ways. So maybe I'm wrong. He might know, and if he does, then it's even worse. But and then that woman, Stacia, wearing that beautiful dress and just looking like this beautiful Kanenhariyo woman, and then she's participating in that. And then the other fellow there, I think his name is Ted, and I've only ever known that guy just to be pretty happy guy, just a pretty happy guy, and he interested to know about stuff, or but I know when I was fighting stuff with tobacco and that sort of thing, he he had an interest to know and follow what was happening with the court case stuff. But I've never really known him to be too actively involved in any of our traditional ways or anything. But Harry, there he was, sitting in front of the behind the chalices and going along, participating along with the rest of them as they steal the people's money and then reinvest it so they can keep the Indian Act system going, and then transfer the land. They literally try to sign a land away to give it to the Canadian government to say that now we're going to manage it as a reserve land. And literally the guy there standing there signing the thing he's the center of it. All the councillors moved. They moved their spot, not him, not Marc Miller. He didn't have to move. He was the center of the table. He was the king of the table. Literally a soldier whose battalions or whose group come and bayoneted our children and ruined our food and kept our elders from getting medicine. He participated in that. He's sitting in the middle of the table and they're acting like he's a good guy. You know, and I'm looking at the pictures and I see him stand there and at the podium, and I'm looking at those paintings. I grew up with them pictures, those paintings on the wall. I recognize them, you know, my whole life. And that meeting happened in the council house, and they called it the community center because they got government money and they changed the face of it, and they took the two ends, the doors out, and they changed it to the community center. But that land was the Longhouse. That was the Mohawk Nation Capitol building. And when the Indian Act came, the people burnt the building down so they couldn't keep it. And then they put another one up and they did it again on that land. And they had a grits mill right there. That was all the nations. And it's still standing there today. It's still there. And so they're in that building. They're in that very spot that our ancestors set up for to run a Mohawk Nation Council. That's where it's supposed to be held. It used to be 2 stories. And that way then if people travel from somewhere, they had a place to stay. Upstairs in like apartment rooms. That's all gone now. But that Marc Miller in 2020, we're at the table and he openly said it, that he knows the Canadian government actively worked at undermining the traditional government and the hereditary leaders, and that they've been not talking to them and avoiding them and not dealing with them. And he told me Canadian government was gonna go and meet with the hereditary chiefs, the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs, and come to some sort of solution over there. What was happening? And I recorded them. I've got it. People recorded that he said those words. He talked about they recognized that the Canadian government participated in the destruction of our traditional government, and then he has the audacity to sit in the very same building. Well, they pretend they're us and sign documents and sign our lands and money and the resources away from the people. And the people won't get that land. That's not coming back to the reserve to be divided up, and then the families and women will get land and, you know, places for their children, because all the lands that the federal government usurps and calls ban land, they either put government buildings on them or they lease them out to off-reserve farmers, or they put housing projects on them and then charge the people to live in them. That's what happens. You know? Very rarely does a property come up for sale, and if it does, it goes to the highest bidder, so the poor people don't ever get a chance. And when they do it for sale, it's because the building is in so rough repair, they don't want to pay the fine, they don't want to pay to fix it. So they put it up for sale and then let the people get one, but then they got to put all their own personal money in to fix it. Maybe it's got mold, or it's rotting, or whatever. That's what happens. So there's nothing positive about this. This is just terrible tyranny, and it breaks my heart. And I don't want to just be negative. So everybody says to me, "Oh, well, you say this, but this is what we got to live with now, or we've had this for so long." Well, the traditional governance structure still exists, still around, still here. People still remember, and we need to go back to our way and ignore them anymore. We've been quietly tolerating one another, but now they overstepped. They're out of line completely. They got our symbols, our national symbols, on their buildings, on the federal government buildings. You know, the Confederacy belt and things like that on the police station. And those are Ontario Provincial Police with Indian badges, but they run everything and they directly report to the OPP. They don't even enforce our rules or laws. They're enforcing Canadian rule and law on our land. Then everybody gets upset. Why would you call them OPP? They're not OPP. Well, they're not ungahume sagudienas, right? They're not ruskanagete. They're not following underneath the system of the great law at all. And then those fellows that are working those jobs, they get offended if I say that. Oh, they're offended. Oh, why would you say that about me? Well, because you're acting like a traitor. Their email addresses all end in OPP. I don't know if it's still, maybe they changed it, but it's gross. It's gross. And we need to. I think we need to restart. I think we need to rekindle and put our system back together. And there's a whole bunch of people who've been caught in the crossfire of this who feel like they don't have a voice or that they won't have a place within the Longhouse system, within the Garnet Gold system, and so they're leaning towards the Indian Act system because they feel that they're going to get alienated or that they're not going to have a say, a political say, if we use the traditional government because maybe they don't got a clan or something. But we can't have that. We got to use all the pieces in our laws that allow for people that are in that situation to get to have a place. They got to be adopted in and be a part. And some people might have issues about that. They might feel like that's bothers them. Oh, wait a minute, I gotta be adopted, but I've always been this. But you haven't always been this. You just were members because the Indian Act said you were. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been. And so we have the right within our laws. If somebody wants to accept the great law and accept living in a peaceful situation with one another, they have the option to join. And we got all the pieces are there. So we shouldn't have it as that shouldn't be a reason or an argument to say, well, we can't use the traditional government because nobody's got clans or too many people, because we can assign people, put everybody in the clans. That's not a thing. It's not even hard. So and so if there's people arguing that, but there's a solution and they don't want to accept the solution, then really what it is that they don't want to accept our traditional government. And if that's the case, then this place was set aside for our customs and usages, our way of living. And if they don't want to be a part of that, they're welcome to leave. That's it. This is our homeland. This is all we got left. So if people don't want to follow the custom of the Gagaga people, then they don't need to be here. Because where else are we supposed to go? The ones who do want that. The ones who aren't willing to tolerate the Canadian assimilation plan. This is all we have. And our ancestors died to make sure we had something. It just makes me sick. And it's happening in all the other communities too. And everybody's rumbling, what do we do? Well, we all know what we got to do. They're going to have to get dealt with. They're going to have to get evicted or something. We're going to have to deal with what the Trudeau and Marc Miller and them are up to. And we got to deal with that. That's all there is to it. And the people got to go and occupy the land. We got to take the land back from the federal government who's claiming it's band land. No, it's not. It's Mohawk land. Kanenhariyo land. And in our old system, if you needed the land, old elders said, go and pick a spot out and put the stones out and mark it out and use it. We don't need to have them control us. I know there's lots of work to do. I know it's going to be layers of stuff, and it's more complicated than how I'm describing it. But that's what we're going to have to do. I mean, that's it. So, talk to you later. So, if you like this podcast and you want to hear more of this sort of stuff, please check out our Patreon. Become a subscriber. Make a donation. Like us on Facebook. Like this channel on your YouTube. Subscribe and be supportive. And I'll keep making this stuff. Have a good one.